Ladies and gentlemen, John Durham will utilize, and I've done a number of segments like this, but it's very, very important to remember, John Durham will utilize the Inspector General report to eventually press charges against people who conspired to defraud the United States government. Right now, we have a situation where we're going into the 2020 election. William Barr, President Trump have all the information. President Trump has given William Barr, they have most of the information, I should say. John Durham has most of the information, I should say. He very likely doesn't have the entire IG report, but he probably knows that there's a lot of information within the IG report that isn't good for Comey, Clapper, Brennan, Strzok, McCabe, and others. There is a reason that the IG recommended charges against James Comey. That's a very, very good thing. There's also a reason that William Barr stated he could not press charges. He could not indict anyone at this moment. Or there's a reason that nobody's been indicted at this moment. Right now, Andrew McCabe is under criminal investigation. James Comey has had charges leveled against him by the IG report. James Baker is under criminal investigation. Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, their information is out in the public, and we know that he said, "We will stop Trump." Clapper and Brennan have kind of admitted to disseminating and receiving information that wasn't accurate. Well, that's what they say now. People like Tom Fitton and John Solomon are finding out, and Sarah Carter and just a whole bunch of people are finding out not only irregularities, blatant criminal violations of the law every single day. Every single day. The IG report will kind of give a roadmap. The thing that you have to remember is that this is, even though it's August of 2019, we're in election season at the moment. Clinton is going to run. There was a $50,000 a plate function that was advertised or reported yesterday. Okay, 50,000 to what was it? 35,000 to 15,000. 50,000 being champion level. She's running again, ladies and gentlemen, and it's going to be the biggest story that I have been covering that nobody else has been covering. And when it comes out, we will realize why all of this took place. We'll also realize that this will be the media's last stand. So what I'm saying is, just be patient. Already you have former FBI officials, former prosecutors saying that this new IG report is going to actually recommend indictments of a whole lot of people. I think it's going to be horrible for Andrew McCabe since his name is on the FISA application. So I think it's going to be absolutely horrible for Andrew McCabe. It's going to be horrible for Comey and Strzok and everyone involved in this, but Andrew McCabe especially. It's going to be horrible because his name is on the application to spy on Carter Page and eventually others. I'll just read you really quickly. This report talks about the IG report will talk about the anomalies and the illegal behavior surrounding why Peter Strzok went to London to speak to Alexander Downer, to interview Alexander Downer, even though it was only gossip and hearsay, and this was an Australian diplomat who was linked to the Clinton Foundation. It'll explain why Christopher Steele was utilized even though he was desperate to stop President Trump, and even though the Clinton campaign funneled money through a law firm to outsource Fusion GPS, who then outsourced Christopher Steele. And the fact that at a certain point you can't just simply say, well, we didn't know. Prisons across the world and jails across the world are filled with people who say, gosh, I just didn't know. I didn't realize this. at a certain point, it's not the actual truth. It's simply an alibi that makes no sense or an excuse that makes no sense for criminal behavior. James Comey didn't know who Fusion GPS and Glenn Simpson were, or he didn't know that they were outsourced by Clinton. Mueller takes it one step further and says, "Oh, I didn't know." What? He said he didn't know who Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS were. He had no clue. Well, how can you investigate? How can you become the face of a special counsel if you have no clue even who if you have no clue the company and the person in charge of outsourcing the dossier and how the dossier was compiled? But really quickly, I want to read you this. Washington Examiner, ex-FBI lawyer Carter Page FISA application approved in unusual way by McCabe, Yates, and Baker. McCabe and Baker are under criminal investigation. Sally Yates is known to be an adversary of the Trump campaign. She was in the Justice Department. So this is by Jake Dunleavy. A former top lawyer for the FBI described to lawmakers the unusual way the surveillance request targeting former Trump campaign associate Carter Page was handled by top leadership at the Justice Department and FBI, according to a transcript released this week. So this was several weeks back in front of a joint session of the House Judiciary Oversight Committee on August 31st, 2018. Former FBI Director, Deputy General Counsel Trisha Anderson said she was normally responsible for signing off on FISA applications before they reach the desks of her superiors for approval. So this is just one example that the IG is going to talk about. It wasn't even Andrew McCabe's role to look at. It wasn't even Andrew McCabe's role to look at the FISA application before a number of people under him. That changed. Anderson said the linear path those applications typically take was upended in October 2016 with FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe and Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates signing off on the application before she did. Because of that unusual high-level involvement, she didn't see the need to second-guess the FBI, the FISA application. Well, it's not just she didn't see the need. She was told not to. She was told not to. You can't simply say, well, I saw this and therefore I didn't do what I usually, I didn't engage in conduct I usually engage in. Okay? It was an obvious setup, and they obviously framed they obviously framed President Trump by doing things they didn't normally do. And if, for example, Trisha Anderson looked at the application and looked at the Steele dossier, she would never have sent. The reason that she wasn't a part of the decision making is because the current protocol and bureaucracy would have worked to prevent President Trump from being investigated based on bogus suspicion. That's why Yates and McCabe and Baker, who's under criminal investigation, wanted to bypass the normal chain of command and just have the application go to them. The Page FISA application was filed by the Justice Department and FBI. So the Page FISA application was filed by the Justice Department and FBI with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court in October 2016. A surveillance warrant was granted and 3 renewals were subsequently approved. The FISA application relied heavily on unverified research. Well, it's not just unverified. It was just complete nonsense and gossip and just hearsay. There are a number of people. Well, actually, William D. Campbell, the FBI informant that spoke out and testified against both the Clinton Foundation and President Obama's administration, said that Russian lobbyists were bragging about their influence over both. But see, the thing is, they had William D. Campbell, but they didn't start an investigation based on his, and he was an actual informant. Steele was not. But they didn't start an investigation based on his evidence. Money, cash flowed to the Clinton Foundation amid Russian uranium deal. Democrats just simply close their ears. They don't want to hear that. And it's really interesting. They cannot. If you tell you, they'll instantly say, it's been debunked. It's been debunked. No, it hasn't been debunked. Nothing's been debunked. Cash actually flowed from the Clinton Foundation, from Uranium One to the Clinton Foundation. Not just cash, millions of dollars. That has never been investigated. Or if it has been investigated, it wasn't the grounds for a special counsel, which should happen. Yes, definitely should happen, because Clinton is running again, and she essentially runs the Democratic. There is no Democratic Party. So she essentially runs the Democratic Party, but let's continue. Anderson said all FISAs need to be signed off on in the FBI's National Security Law Branch, where she was assigned at the time. Anderson said she was the senior executive service approver for the initiation of the Page FISA, including determining whether there is legal sufficiency. Of course, Trisha Anderson was not given the opportunity to say this is nonsense. But Anderson stressed, in this particular case, I'm drawing a distinction because my boss and my boss's boss had already reviewed the application and approved this application. She emphasized, quote, this one was handled a little bit different in that sense, in that it received very high-level review and approvals, informal. Okay, so before it ever came to her for a signature. So what they did was game the system. Yates and McCabe signed the FISA application before Trisha Anderson. Why is that? Why did Yates and McCabe never do this? So one thing that's lost in the mix is that this never happened before. They cannot look at a situation. They cannot say, hey, you know what, this has happened before, and here's when, because it's never happened before. This is not how they do things, which is why they have Trisha Anderson there looking over information before her superiors. So they never do that. They never. It's interesting because the current protocol should have prevented all of this nonsense. So a lot of people who kind of sidestep all of this, they say, well, you know what, we're going to have to find out new protocol to prevent this from ever happening. The existing protocol actually could have prevented this. Trisha Anderson was supposed to look at the FISA application before Sally Yates and before McCabe. That never happened. So she was forced to sign off on it after her two superiors, her boss's boss was Yates, her boss was McCabe, after her two superiors signed the application. Because the FISA application had already been approved by such high levels, Anderson said she did not look at the FISA application with much skepticism. Well, of course not. What is she going to do? Tell her boss that, oh yeah, that's just not the way, and it never works that way. In corporations or in government, the General Counsel Baker personally reviewed and made edits to the FISA. For example, Anderson said, the Deputy Director was involved in reviewing the FISA line by line, and the Deputy Attorney General over the DOJ of the street was similarly involved, as I understood, reviewing the FISA application line by line. And then he said, and then Baker defended the FBI's handling of the FISA process, saying, quote, we took the dossier seriously, but we didn't necessarily take it literally. Again, this is all doublespeak, and it did and did not treat it as, quote, literally true in every respect. Baker said, quote, I am not going to go into detail with respect to what investigative steps we took to try to validate it. Well, of course you can't, because you set up Trump. There's not a person. Look. There's not a person on the planet who doesn't believe they set up Trump. Everyone knows they set up Trump. The issue here is that the left-leaning publications that want to disparage or that want to prevent this from coming out, their goal is not to say, hey, their goal isn't to acknowledge that there's enough here to warrant suspicion that Trump was set up. They know that. They don't care. That's why I keep saying the left does not care as long as if the tables were turned, they would care. If it happened against Bernie, well, Bernie wouldn't care. But if it happened against Clinton, oh my God. oh my God, you'd never hear the end of it. It would be the sexist and highly unethical, immoral attempt at framing the first female president. But the thing is, what they want to do is they want to hide behind plausible deniability, say, well, we were being infiltrated by the Russians. Well, what did the Russians do? Well, they informed the country that Bernie Sanders was cheated by hacking the DNC and disclosing. This is the national security crime they're talking about, disclosing that the actual Democrats cheated their own candidate, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz was forced to resign in disgrace, and maybe some votes were lost. And they can't even tell you how many votes were lost. This is not national security. This has nothing to do with protecting American lives. And if you're so worried about another country interfering in our election, why didn't you indict Christopher Steele? Why didn't you indict Clinton for outsourcing and purchasing the Steele dossier through her law firm? So the Steele dossier was compiled with help from Russian sources, a Russian intelligence source, active Russian government officials. And the Steele dossier was complete nonsense. So Anderson said, quote, it typically would not have been the case that people such as McCabe and Yates would sign off on a FISA application before she did. Well, of course not. But that's what took place. Ladies and gentlemen, subscribe to H.A. Goodman's other channel right now. Some really important segments there. And the FISA, the IG report is going to eventually declassify information pertaining to why Trisha Anderson did not sign off and why McCabe, Yates, and Baker signed off before her, which is a crime. They did so as part of a setup of Trump. This is pretty obvious and overt. And if the defense says, well, it's our right to do so, well, okay, then there's information to explain why. Did you look at the Steele dossier? Oh, really? Did you verify Sally Yates, Baker, and McCabe, James Baker and Andrew McCabe? Did you verify the Steele dossier? Okay, so you could have done this against any. There could have been a dossier against Clinton, and you would have looked at it the same way. Almost certainly as well, McCabe and Baker and Yates. I don't even know if Yates is under. Yates had, if there's testimony with Yates, I know that Baker and McCabe. So we're still in the second, not even the second inning, the bottom of the first inning regarding all of this. It's election season. After Clinton loses to Trump, you will see the proverbial heads roll politically regarding all of this. Give me your thoughts below. Definitely check out H.A. Goodman's other channel right now. Thank you.